Why is that so? He goes on to analyze the reasons. What is the per capita availability of land for our farmers? Even at that time, the land availability per capita was only about 1 acre per person. Today it is even worse. I have the latest statistics with me. The number of holdings in this country, the number of farmers who are dependent on agriculture in this country is something like 137 million or 13 crores. If you take the norm of 5 persons per family, that will mean about 65 to 70 crores of Indian population are dependent on agriculture. Now, the same ratio also prevails in Karnataka state. Now, why is it that they are unable to progress, unable to achieve prosperity? I will give you another interesting statistics. That is, the present state domestic product, or the total income of all the people in Karnataka state, is estimated at something like 5,30,000 crores. That is the total income of all the people, including all of us in this hall. That is the estimate of the current income. Out of this, what is the contribution of agriculture? Agriculture is about 15%, 16%. Agriculture per se, land-based agriculture, is only about 12.5%. And grouped with forestry and fisheries, it comes to about 15.5%. Now, out of this 5,35,000 crores, if you take out 12.5%, you have barely 70,000 crores. That 70,000 crores is shared by 50% of the state's population. That is, 50% of the state's population is about 3 crores. Now, you can divide and see, it comes to just about 23,000 per income per person per year. Now, the remaining 4,60,000 crores is taken by the remaining half of the population. That's another 3 crores. That means their income averages to something like 1.5 lakh rupees per person per year. Now, the disparity between the income in agriculture sector and other sectors is something like 1:2. That's how you don't have to travel very far from Bangalore to see farmers in that extremely pitiable condition. You look at the kind of housing they have, the kind of clothing they have, the kind of education their children get, as compared to any person employed outside agriculture. That's why most farmers would aspire to have their children employed in government, even if it is a Group T or peon's post, rather than being condemned to agriculture on their small plots of land available in the villages. So, Sir M.V.'s major point was that people must be shifted out of agriculture. But he did not want agriculture to be neglected itself. He cited the example of United States Department of Agriculture, where the department functions like a university, and every farmer is treated as a student. So every now and then the department gets in touch with the farmer and teaches him how to do farming according to the most modern methods of agriculture. And that's how, even at that time, the productivity of American agriculture was at least 3 or 4 times more than the productivity of Indian agriculture. And that situation, unfortunately, has not changed today. In fact, the progressive immiserization of the farmer is continuing to this day. The land holding size is coming down with every year because the population dependent on agriculture, even though it has come down from 73% to about 50% now, in absolute numbers it has increased, while the land area has remained the same. So this is the tragedy of Indian agriculture, which Sir M. Vishwesvaraya pointed out. Now, many people I hear talk about, when you talk of giving land to industry, they say, what happens to our food security? If all the land is taken away by industrialists, who will grow food for us? This is one of the most mistaken notions that we entertain often in public debate. Because, take the example of Karnataka. Some years ago, I had occasion to suggest to government that they should have plenty of land available for industry. And the government gave some consideration to my suggestion. And they went on to acquire something like 100,000 acres of land all over the state, in many parts of the state, every district 2,000 or 3,000 acres. And there was a lot of criticism that agricultural land is all being taken away from farmers, and very soon we will not have enough food production in the state. Nothing could be further than this from truth. Now, the total land available in Karnataka is something like 1 crore 16 lakh hectares. 1 crore 16 lakh hectares translates to something like 3 crores acres. What the government acquired for industry was 1 lakh acres. Now, out of 300 lakh acres, if you have diverted 1 lakh acres for industry, what great tragedy could that be? And look at the productivity of agriculture, the employment created by agriculture, which is the biggest employer in the country. How many people can agriculture support on 1 acre of land? 2 persons, 3 persons, 4 persons, 5 persons? If industry were to use 1 acre of land, it can employ 50 persons, 25 persons. And the levels of income, levels of wages paid by the industry would probably be much higher than what people could earn in the kind of farming that goes on in the state of Karnataka or elsewhere. Now, this simple kind of facts of economics are not brought out by people who want to compare the benefits of land use in industry and land use in agriculture. Now, this is also one of the points that Sir M.V. emphasized, that we must see that population which is now trapped in agriculture, he considered agriculture a very precarious occupation in India. Population which is now trapped in agriculture must be employed in industry, because most of the time people who are working on land have so much of free time, they don't have anything to do. Once they have sown the crop, for a few weeks they don't have much to do. So there is so much of leisure or idle manpower available in the rural areas that they should be profitably employed in rural industries so that they could add to their income. Unfortunately, even to this day, that has not become a reality. Now, one other argument that he put forward was, of course, we all have heard of industrialize or perish, and a famous statement of Sir M. Vishwesvaraya. And he thought government must actively encourage private sector to set up industry. This was not strictly in accordance with the philosophy adopted by independent India, because they wanted to encourage public sector more than private sector. And Sir M. Vishwesvaraya was never very happy with that kind of a policy. He thought large industrialists should be encouraged by infrastructure being given to them, concessions being given to them, so that they create more and more employment opportunities. Unfortunately, because of our exclusive focus on public sector industries, we could not expand the employment opportunities in industries. Again, in the field of power generation, he was a great visionary. He asked for increasing the generation of electricity in the state and in the country, increasing the facilities available for transport, including aviation. And he advocated aggressive borrowings by government if necessary to finance some of these things, which these days, of course, is considered a very unconventional thing or very risky thing to do, because government should not be, even though every government is borrowing, many people think that, if you borrow beyond a limit, then you get into a debt trap, which is also true. But Sir M.V.'s idea was that you borrow not for spending on wasteful expenditure, but on creation of assets. You must borrow to create productive assets so that those assets in turn generate income for the country, for the government, and therefore you are able to repay the loans. What is now known as the Keynesian approach to stimulate development in an economy. But this was long before Keynes' ideas became very popular across the world. So like this, there are many, many thoughts of Sir M. Visvesvaraya, which are to be found in this great work, Planned Economy for India, and other books of his. And Mr. Srinath has done a great service in bringing the most important of those ideas together in the pages of one book, so that all of us who are interested in knowing about the ideas of Sir M. Visvesvaraya, mainly relating to the economic and social advancement of this country, can find all of them in one source. And these ideas need to be discussed, researched, and then validated, so that we could adopt these things as part of our public policy, so that we can actually achieve the kind of prosperity that Sir M. Visvesvaraya dreamt of for this country and for this state. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for this opportunity.